everybody, it's Sarah, and the noise from the construction work outside my window started back up right as I sat down to film, so I decided to not give a fuck right now, and I'm very sorry if you can hear a loud noise in the background every now and again, or not even every now and again, like constantly. But anyway, today we're going to talk about the like 50 books I somehow already read in February, which, don't worry, it's not that much, it's just 15 books. And I do not know how that happened. Remember when in my February TBR I was all stressed out because I had 20 books on my TBR? Well, I don't think that's gonna be a problem. So yeah, these right here are the books I read in February, and the ones that are turned around up here at the top are of course of my secret TBR, and I won't share those with you in that video, but I'm almost done with the TBR, so I think my vlog should be up next week, fingers crossed. But yeah, let me put that back down again because I can feel my wrist already starting to hurt again, and then let's talk about books. So this time around I won't forget to start with my rereads, of which I had quite a few, which probably is a big reason why I managed to read so many books already. Just 2021 is gonna be my rereading year. I think I already reread 12 books this year and I'm just having a really good time. But yeah, the first 3 books I reread in February were the first 3 books in the Heroes of Olympus series. So The Lost Hero, The Son of Neptune, and The Mark of Athena. This is the spin-off series of the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, following Percy Jackson after the first series, but also introducing quite a few new characters. I'm really enjoying my reread, although while I did enjoy the Heroes of Olympus more than I enjoyed Percy Jackson when I read both series for the first time, I think actually now on reread I prefer the Percy Jackson series. I don't know why. I mean, I know a little bit of a reason why, and that's because I don't like romance. And yeah, I just have something against them, okay? And I also really don't like Jason Grace. I think he's one of the most boring characters ever. And yeah, so every time he gets a POV chapter, I'm just like, ugh, when is it gonna be over? But yeah, aside from that, really enjoying my reread. And I decided to stop for now and only continue in March so I can finish the books that I actually intended to finish in February. I read all 3 of these in the first week of February actually. So yeah, but can recommend, had a good time. I also reread Warbreaker, which of course I reread for the Crab-along, which is a year-long Cosmere read-along, and the February read was Warbreaker. And what can I say about this? I mean, I reread it in 2020, talked about my thoughts on it in 2020, reread it now and enjoyed it just as much now. I just love all the characters, and I love how much is a setup for like later Cosmere books and like the bigger Cosmere universe. And you know, it's just great. I love it, and I think it's a great place to start if you want to get into the Cosmere and into Brandon Sanderson, because it is a standalone, and you know, even though it does set up a lot for the Cosmere, it's also just a good story on its own. And then lastly, I reread The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, which is the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy. And I mostly got around finally to rereading this because I joined an adult high fantasy buddy read group. And yeah, this was one of the buddy reads we chose. We chose like 2 buddy reads and you could choose whichever you wanted to pick. But yeah, so I reread The Fifth Season, so now hopefully I'm finally gonna finish this trilogy. And I have to say I enjoyed it more on a reread than the first time around. And the reason for that, I think, is one of N.K. Jemisin's, I wouldn't say problems, because, you know, you have a writing style, and if you choose to write a book that way, then you choose to write a book that way. But one thing about N.K. Jemisin's books I've noticed so far, it was the same in the Dreamblood duology, in the first book in The Killing Moon, is that she does not explain a lot, but she kind of just throws you into the story. And a lot of times it can take like the first 2/3 of the first book until you kind of know what's going on. And so because of that, it was like more fun to read this on a reread because I kind of already knew what was going on. I kind of already knew how everything worked. And so yeah, I can highly recommend, if you have tried the 5th season, if you haven't liked it the first time you read it and decided not to continue on with the series, I can highly recommend you try and read it again and then continue on with the series, because I think it was a good decision actually on my part to reread this and then continue on with the series. So now I have 6 books to talk about that I read for the first time, and let me start with Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nhi Vo, because I do not have my physical copy with me, because I already lent it out to a friend who also already read it and absolutely loved it. This was the pick for my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, and the goal of the book club is to read 1 adult high fantasy book written by a woman per month, because women in adult high fantasy are solely underrepresented, and there's even a lot of people who think there are no women writing adult high fantasy, which is absolute bullshit. So if you're interested in finding out more about the amazing books that women write within the adult high fantasy genre, I will leave all the links to my book club linked down below, and you're welcome to join us. I'm also trying to have the Discord be a little bit more active, which, you know, is kind of hard for me because I'm not an active social person. But anyway, now to this book, Empress of Salt and Fortune. I won't tell you too much about this, because as for all the buddy reads for my book club, I will have a full spoiler-free review for this book at the end of the month or the beginning of the next month. But this is a novella, basically. It's an Eastern Asian inspired high fantasy novella, and it's told in a way where you have 2 characters. One character tells the other character a story, and that story is the story of an empress living in exile. And I just really loved it. I loved the way it was written. I loved that the story potentially could have been a full-length novel, maybe even multiple novels on its own. But it was less about the story itself, but more about the way the story was told. I don't know if that makes sense. And yeah, I can highly recommend it, also because it's a really short read. It's barely 100 pages, and I'll tell you more of my thoughts once I have my full review up. And once I have my full review up, I will leave it linked down below, but there will probably be like 2 more weeks until that's up. Then next, I finished the Cursebreaker series by Brigid Kemmerer. The 3rd book, A Vow So Bold and Deadly, came out in January, and I read it. And just a second, but I just love the spines on these books. They're so pretty and hollow, and these are like almost the only paperbacks I have where I went to certain lengths to try and not to break the spines, because it's so pretty. But anyway, the Cursebreaker series started with the 1st book, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which was a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And you had 2 perspectives. One was Harper, who's a young teenage girl, not a young teenage girl, she's like a girl living in Washington DC. But one day she is kidnapped to another realm. And the reason why she is kidnapped is, and that's the 2nd perspective, Ren, centuries ago, has been cursed to relive the same season over and over again, and at the end of each season he turns into a monster and kills everyone around him. And Beauty and the Beast retelling, he has to find a girl to fall in love with him to break the curse. And then the 2nd and the 3rd book just kind of expand on the world. Now, I did not like the 2nd book already. I also didn't like the 3rd book. And the reason why I didn't like both of them, the reason why I didn't like the 2nd book, was because I felt like the characterization of all of the characters was completely off, and they started acting like they wouldn't act, or I think they wouldn't act in the way they were set up in the 1st book as characters. And then the 3rd book I didn't like because I just found each and every character more and more insufferable, aside from maybe Harper. Relationships that I kind of enjoyed the dynamics of even within the 2nd book, I started disliking in the 3rd book, and it was just like so annoying. And then you have this character who used to be the daughter of the queen of this country, who was like really cruel and enjoyed violence and stuff, and she promised herself she wouldn't be like her mother, whatever. But the way she does that is by being too fucking kind, And I am sorry, you can be a nice person, you can be a kind person, but as a queen, you're not allowed to let other people walk all over you and disobey you and spit in your face and then be all surprised when the guards go and, you know, cut the tongue out of said person because, oh my god, that's too cruel. Yeah, but you're the queen and this person just spit in your face. You still need to be respected. You don't need to earn the respect by violence, but, you know, there's gotta be some consequences of spitting into the queen's face. Anyway, that character really, really annoyed me. You know, there's a difference between not wanting to be a cruel ruler and then being a stupid ruler. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when characters are like, but I just wanna be so nice and kind. Yeah, anyway, didn't like this book. Read the first book as a standalone. I think it's fine, it's fun, but don't continue on with the series. Like, don't do that. Then I read The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. I do have a full review of this, so I won't tell you too much about it or my thoughts right now. I will just leave the review link down below and up there. And yeah, this is a new favorite, okay? This is the first book in a series which is called Rook and Rose. And in this series we follow Ren, who is a con artist. And she wants to con her way into this noble family, to be adopted by this family. And then on the side there's also some mysteries going on. There's some mysterious deaths. It's like all fun stuff. And also the world setting is a very Venetian inspired setting and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Also, this is the first truly queer normative world that I have ever read about. And I will never stop talking about that. But yeah, love this book, love the characters, love the world, love the plot. If you want to know more about my thoughts, watch my review and yeah, just go and read this book. You will not be disappointed. Disappointed. So lastly, I have 3 more books. These were actually the 3 books that I chose to read from my physical TBR this month. First, I have The Dubliners by James Joyce. This is a short story collection by James Joyce. And yeah, I mean, I liked it well enough, but I gotta be honest, James Joyce's writing style isn't really my cup of tea. I'm happy that I read it, and now at least I am very certain that I don't even want to attempt to read Ulysses. So that's a positive thing that came out of reading this. Then next I have Abschied von Sidonie by Erich Hacker. The English translation of this book is Farewell Sidonia. And this is kind of a part of my little project that I have of reading all the required literature that I would have had to read for school but that I never read, just like in the next few years sometimes. Hiccups. I get hiccups so often when I film videos, it's like crazy. But anyway, this is a historical fiction novel and the time that it is set at is from the beginning of the 30s to the beginning of the 40s. So it's from the time of the Austrian Civil War, which I don't think many people who aren't from Austria, maybe Germany even, know that Austria had a civil war between the First and the Second World War, which, you know, just great. But yeah, the first half of the 20th century was a great time in Austria. I mean, kind of our own fault, but anyway, this isn't a history lesson. So it's from the Austrian Civil War to the beginning of the Second World War, like until the middle of the Second World War. I think it's from 1933 to 1943. I think that's the time period. And we follow a young girl who was left abandoned as a baby in front of the hospital in this town in, I think, Upper Austria. And she is adopted, not adopted, but she is fostered by this family who loves her very much. However, she is also probably Roma, I think. I mean, it's never said specifically that she's Roma, but just that she belongs to, you know, or she comes from a G-word family, so my guess is Roma. And yeah, it's about her, and she's a very happy, carefree child, but then the Second World War happens, and even before that she was constantly, you know, an outsider. And if you go and read this book, which I don't know if I would recommend reading this book. First of all, it's bleak. Like, usually if you have Second World War fiction that's not Austrian or German, there's even just a ray of sunshine. There's like a person who has hope and who fights on, and like it ends depressingly, but at least the war is over or whatever. Nope, that's not what happens in this book, because and I'll tell you now how it ends, because it's really not about how it ends. We all know that's kind of the point of the book. We all know how it's gonna end, and that is that Sidonie is sent to a concentration camp and dies there. And Erich Hackel very much spells out, like, you know, could we have changed this? Like, could the people have acted differently? I mean, yes, they could, but also it's not human nature to act any differently, so also she would have died anyway in this situation. Like, it's all depressing. Austrian literature is so fucking bleak and depressing. It's really hard to read, also because this is not written in a very emotional way. That's not something, again, that Austrian literature usually does. This is written in a very distanced way, and not objective isn't the right word, but it's written in a way where, you know, it's like you look at it from the outside. It's not written in an emotional way to draw you into the story, but it's just like, this happened and this happened and this happened, and it just makes it all even more bleak. So yeah, if you want to be depressed, read Farewell Sidonia, but also I don't know how much I would recommend it, because I think to read this you have to know a lot of context from like Austrian history, which of course I learned in school. I know about the Austrian Civil War, but there's, for example, things where suddenly Sidonie's like foster father is sent to prison, and if you're aware of what happened at the time, and if you know that he was a communist or a socialist, I guess not National Socialist, so not Nazi, but like a socialist, it makes sense why he was thrown into prison, because the Civil War, the Austrian Civil War, was socialists against the Christian party, the conservatives. And the conservatives won the Civil War, so all the socialists were thrown into prison. And like, there's a lot of context info that you have to know. So yeah, I can recommend it, but I also don't know how much of an enjoyable read. I mean, it's not an enjoyable read in general, but how much of a good read it would be if you don't have the context info. I just talked way too long about Farewell Sidonia. Anyway, the last book I have is The Pages by Murray Bale. I won't talk about this too long because honestly, I just found this to be a very pretentious book. Basically, it's an Australian novel, and in the outback, like in this homestead thing, one person died who was a philosopher, and so a philosopher from Sydney, I think, is sent, and she's sent to analyze all the writings of the passed away philosopher. And it tries to be all deep and shit, this book, but it's really not. And it's boring as fuck, so yeah, not gonna talk about that any longer. But yeah, that was it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. As I said, all the links to my book club are also in the description box down below. I would be very happy if you joined us if you're interested. And did I already ask you to leave your thoughts on the books that I read, if you've read them, in the comments down below? I think I didn't, but if you have any thoughts on the books, then leave them in the comments down below, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!